Hi everyone, thanks for coming back and joining me for another video. Just a quick reminder at the beginning of the video, if you haven't already subscribed, please remember to hit the like button, to hit the notification button, and most importantly, please subscribe to the channel. So anyway guys, oh god, yeah, thank you so much for all of the lovely messages. I wasn't doing it for sympathy telling you about my really terrible week. It was comical towards the end of it. Obviously not so much the fireworks and the dogs, but it was just more of the fact that it all happened at the same time. So in situations like that, you reach a point where you have to laugh at it because it's just, well, as many of you put in the comments, it happens to all of us at one point or another where everything just, well, as they say, it never rains, it pours. And in my case, quite literally. So Meghan's B-word podcast starts with, at this point in the series, we've established that I spent a lot of time in front of the TV growing up. No, it's the first time you've actually said that, Meghan. All of the other stories that you've told over the years where you spent your entire childhood growing up on the set with Married with Children, literally being in TV studios, doing your homework in between dance classes, after school clubs, going to sushi restaurants and various other nice places that your daddy would take you out after you've done any number of classes that he was paying for. But now we have this version of Meghan who grew up sitting in front of the TV, eating her dinner on a tray on her lap while she watched Jeopardy. Yes, this whole big intro is to do with how Meghan loved watching the TV show. She got lost in all of the questions and held her breath as she waited for the contestants' responses. She was so excited she'd sit there and try to focus and absorb whatever facts and questions that came up on the show. It's a bit like me trying to absorb Meghan's words to put them into any sort of chronological order so it makes sense. Her words genuinely confused me. Like, you remember when you used to get those joke emails that went round, or they'd appear on Facebook and it would be, the words would be written in a sentence but they jumble around the letters, and it always used to say that only 1 in 10 people can actually read this, and if you can, you're super smart. But it actually turned out about 98% of people could actually read it. There was nothing special or clever about you. But of course Meghan is still going with the drive of how smart and clever that she is, because she talks about how she was a nerd. Her love of words, expansive vocabularies and homology grammar. I don't know whether she meant analogy grammar. I've listened to it about 5 times and she says homology. So if anyone would like to educate me in the comments, please do so. But I do think it is woke speak for Meghan saying that she talks in word salads, because it literally is this gift. So why this big interesting, non-interesting build-up to do with Jeopardy and words and how she loves quizzes and watching TV? It all comes down to Meghan being able to start off the podcast by explaining what the podcast is about. And she starts with words that begin with the letter B. Beautiful, blessed, brilliant, beguiling, blissful, bedazzling. I've got one for you, Meghan. How about bully? I think she knows that one. But no, that is not the B word that Meghan is referencing. The word that she is talking about that she doesn't actually say is the word bitch. And I will warn you guys that I will say the word bitch, 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 bitch several times throughout this because, well, I'm a grown up and I can say the word. The fact that Meghan is 41 to 45 years old and she's got a podcast on analysing stereotypes and uses the B word but won't actually say it. It's like a 9-year-old that's too scared to swear in front of their mother through absolute fear of having a bar of soap shoved in their mouth. So it was just a very strange podcast if you're not going to say the word. So Meghan's first guest, as we are introduced, Meghan actually knows her because she was her alumni, Robin Thede. Yes, we are excitedly told that they both went to Northwestern University outside Chicago, and Robin. And Meghan then says, we are right around the same age. Right around the same age. Careful, Meghan. Robin's quite openly 43 years old. Slippy slip slip. Now, the fact that Robin does actually say in the podcast she's 42, this goes to show how long ago the podcast was filmed, because Robin turned 43 in July. This also makes sense of some discrepancies that have come up recently where people have questioned why Meghan is saying at 17 months old Lily is just learning to walk. Obviously, that seems to be quite late for a lot of people that have commented for their children. But this obviously makes sense that they were filmed quite some time ago. Why on earth it's taken this long to release them? I dread to think the things that they've either had to cut out of them, or things that they've had to edit to get them to make sense or to get Meghan to stop talking about herself. So Meghan says the word difficult is actually a euphemism for the B word. I beg to differ with Meghan here. When I think of the word difficult, I think of people that I've worked with, and I think that they're very opinionated. They want it done a particular way. They want it done the exact same way every single time, even though you can come up with a better way of doing it. That they don't like change, and there's all different varieties of ways that you can apply it, but never would I turn around and say that difficult equates to being a bitch. I think that is very different, and I think it's got more to do with how you talk to people and how you treat people. As far as I'm concerned, a bitch is someone that goes out of their way to be unnecessarily nasty at times when it just doesn't justify it. Now, Robin goes on to talk about how she is not ashamed to use the word bitch. She uses it in a way where it's comical. She uses it in a way where it's empowering. And as Meghan likes to talk over her guests, as per normal, that she has reclaimed it. She went on to explain that it is used negatively in trolling, in songs, in violent and aggressive situations. So what she's done, like so many other women have done, is she's offset it. Like I said, Mariah Carey with diva, she has offset the negative meaning behind that word and made it something fun and empowering. And Robin actually mentions Lizzo, the singer, and one of Lizzo's phrases is "it's bad bitch o'clock." And yeah, you can hear Meghan cringing in the background. She can't quite keep herself quiet enough. She's, oh no, yes, we get the fact that you do not like the B word. Now, where Robin starts talking about how the word can be used positively, like someone's amazing, you're a bad bitch, old Debbie Downer, or Meghan, or Mimi as we like to call her, has to bring it back down to no, this word must only be negative. Meghan starts saying that she hates it so much that it's actually giving her hives just talking about it. I have zero interest in reclaiming the word, but I respect these women whose work I love and are entirely comfortable with that. You can hear it, can't you? It's that, as I've said before, it's like a jellyfish sting, a double-edged sword. She's just saying something in a way that's, I love the fact that you can still do that, but you know, I don't. And it's, it just grates. It grates. 8 minutes and 54 seconds in. I'm Meghan and this is Archetypes. Here we go, let's get the ball rolling. I might need a glass of wine. Now, Meghan quickly gets in before this podcast starts that all of the guests are friends of hers. And I feel like, I don't know if she did this on purpose, because Paris Hilton got her little disclaimer in very early on the Bimbo episode, where Paris Hilton said, oh, I'm just a bit nervous because I'm shy and I don't know you, I've never met you before. So now Meghan's like, can't have this. These are all my friends, these women, honestly. And her first guest that comes on is Melody Hobson. And, well, here's a mini clip.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you, friend?
I'm good. How are you doing? Oh, it's so nice to see you.
Hi. The way she says that, who talks to your friends like that? Who talks to anyone like that? Hi. It's either a sexy, dirty phone call or it's the snake from Jungle Book. Trust in me. Hi, just cringe factor. Now, what is quite funny, before I start talking about Melody, rather than, you guys listening to Meghan talking about Melody, she says that I learned a lot talking to these ladies, and you will too. Well, hopefully that is if Meghan actually stops interrupting, over talking, or playing these really irritating, cheesy, music-backed, post-recorded messages telling us all about her guests. The whole idea of a podcast when you're interviewing people is to let them introduce themselves. And we end up with the exact same ratio here. Melody talks for, I think it was 20 seconds. Then we have 2 minutes of Meghan talking about Melody. And it's the same for every single podcast. Why am I even surprised at this point? So some people are like, I've never heard of Melody Hobson. Well, I had heard of her. I'd heard of her because I remember the name floating around when Meghan just randomly did a $25 Starbucks donation, if you remember that. Very well publicised, these $25 cards that she gifted to people that were staying up working late on, I think it was women's workers' rights, that Meghan had used her title to try and lobby senators with. And Melody just happens to be chairwoman at none other than Starbucks. Now, obviously, Mimi cannot resist to explain to the listeners why she has a connection to Melody. It takes me back to when we both did the New York Times Deal Book Summit back in 2021, and we were talking about advancing women's equality. I remember a quote, and it stuck with me, from The Art of War. Well, of course, Meghan would know everything about the art of war, seeing as she declares it on anyone that she feels has slighted her. Now, Melody Hobson, she is an incredibly successful woman in her own right, and she also happens to have appeared on, Oprah's chat show with her very famous husband, George Lucas, who, as most of you are probably aware, he was behind the Star Wars and Indiana Jones franchises. Melody has links to Estee Lauder, to Starbucks, previously DreamWorks, Good Morning America, and now CBS News. She is quite the incredible powerhouse, and in 2020 she became the first black woman to be a chairperson for Starbucks, which is an S&P 500 company, and she ranked 94th in Forbes' World's 100 Most Powerful Women's list. Meghan, as you can imagine, must have been drooling and frothing at the mouth for this guest, who naturally is her friend. Now, Melody does actually get quite a large segment in explaining everything that she went through growing up and how she had to push herself to become such a successful businesswoman. And obviously she has had a lot of things thrown at her, and she gives her various reasons for potentially being labelled as the B word, for being strong-willed and opinionated. And she didn't get to where she is and being that successful through being a shrinking violet. But this is where Meghan straight away jumps on it. So it's just the persona of the idea of, by standing in your authority, can somehow feel uncomfortable. What she's basically saying is she is trying to justify her atrocious behaviour to people as Meghan embracing and standing in and owning her own authority. Sorry if that's a bit of a mouthful, but what Meghan is trying to say throughout this podcast is she had a position of power and authority, and that's why people were threatened of her, not because she was a bitch. Now, something which I'm sure is basically clear to most of us is you cannot have authority over anyone if you don't have respect. And if you don't give respect to people, they're never going to respect you. And this is a lesson that I fear that Meghan is never going to learn throughout her entire life. Meghan demands, she doesn't ask, and that is never going to fare well with anyone. And I think this is one of the things with Meghan trying to fit in with a certain clique of women. These women, like Melody, have obviously worked incredibly hard. They have probably been, I suppose, a powerhouse and maybe a little bit of a terrifying boss at times to achieve everything that they have done, but that doesn't mean that they have gone out of their way to be nasty and cruel to people. Meghan somehow seems to be justifying it, trying to compare herself and the struggles that she went through. Struggles, I know that makes me laugh, but you can see where she's trying to twist it all, going, I'm like one of these women. The only reason why people don't like me is because I'm a woman, it's because I'm black, it's because I'm successful. And it's like, well no, you're not a particularly nice person, and you're not particularly likable. It's got nothing to do with being difficult, or in fact the B word, unless of course you mean bully. I think that would possibly have more to do with the reasons why people aren't particularly fond of her. And this is the thing with the podcast. It doesn't take a genius to work out the fact that Meghan is using every single podcast to talk about a label or an accusation, an allegation that has been thrown her way. Obviously, Meghan was famously called Duchess Difficult in the beginning of her relationship, with the demands that she was doing and the problems she was causing in the run-up to the wedding, let alone her behaviour after the wedding, which seemed to have definitely taken a turn for the worse. 27 minutes and 20 seconds in, Meghan tells us that she's made it known her deep dislike for labels such as difficult, pushy, or the B word, especially the last word. I think she means bitch. Now, this is one thing that definitely is irritating me with this podcast. Meghan has literally created a podcast to talk to successful, powerful women and to do with dissecting and analysing words and labels that are used to set back women. But she, at 41 to 45 years old, cannot say the word. It's rather immature considering that she is the one that made this a podcast. You're the one that wanted to talk about it, so let's talk about it. Let's talk about the B word, bitch. So this is where the fun really starts happening, a typical bit of Meghan's podcast. She then starts talking about how the word originated, where it came from, and it goes back to ancient Greece. It goes back to the Greek goddess Artemis. And then she goes on to talk about how the word has been used historically to degrade and insult women. 27 minutes and 36 seconds in, after 5 minutes, it comes back round to Meghan telling us that the word has a ripple effect on a granular level, all because she's talking about women, all because women, certain women, challenge the social order of things. They are a threat to others, so naturally have to be beaten down and labelled and to be called the B word, because they are shaking up the patriarchy of societal norms. Meghan, the justice bringer to all women. Meghan, who is fighting for every single woman's rights, unless you work for her, because if you work for her, you will be silenced with a big fat NDA and be told that you are not to be coddled. So we are now on to Meghan's final guest, which is Victoria Jackson. Now, Victoria, we have been told previously that she is a personal friend of Meghan's. This came up in her recent Cut magazine interview. And it's funny, isn't it, how Meghan's friends are all linked. The two women were introduced by fellow friend and female activist Glow, or Gloria Steinem as the rest of the world knows her. And it's funny, isn't it, that Meghan's friends, and much like her taxpayer-funded £32 million royal wedding, the guest list just read like a business venture. I think that anyone that Meghan has in her life these days is purely there for transactional business purposes. Victoria gets a whole 20 seconds to explain that she is not the Victoria Jackson from Saturday Night Live, and that is when, of course, Meghan, or Mimi, likes to take over. 2.3 minutes later, Victoria is finally allowed to tell her story. Now, Victoria actually managed to achieve something on this podcast that no other guest of Meghan's has managed to do previously, and that was to earn her silence. I do believe it was possibly not actually true that Meghan stayed quiet and Spotify just edited her out, because the story that Victoria told, I'll be honest with you, put a lump in my throat several times, and it was to do with her 13-year-old daughter who, after suffering headaches behind her eye, got diagnosed with a disease called neuromyelitis optica, and they were given 4 years for her to live. And just, it was very upsetting and heartbreaking. But I'll tell you now, a spoiler, that her daughter Ali is now 29 years old. But obviously the devastating diagnosis led to Victoria and her husband setting up the Guthrie Jackson Foundation, which is dedicated to funding research and hopefully one day a cure for the disease. Victoria Jackson had a very successful makeup range in the 80s that became very successful on the QVC shopping channel. She made her fortune and she invested her fortune into the research. Then Meghan starts obviously voicing how awful it must have been for them and everything. You think, oh, maybe she has shown a little bit of empathy here. But then she begins to question Victoria about the B word. And I was like, is she for real? Are you serious right now? Meghan is trying to ask that during Victoria's fight for a cure, being up against medical boards, investors, and pushing for people to listen, was she ever labelled difficult? How could she even try to get Victoria's story put into the same podcast about being labelled a bitch? She's literally talking about her fight, her dedication, her ambition and drive to curing a deadly disease, and Meghan's pushing this into her narrative of women being unfairly labelled a bitch. Surely no one in their right mind would label a woman that is fighting to help cure a disease from thousands of people, a disease that could have claimed the life of her own daughter, a bitch or difficult. It's a very, very weird story to try and include in this podcast as far as I'm concerned. Victoria invested more than $70 million of her own money into her fight, not just for that of her daughter's health, but everyone also affected by the disease. This paid off as it actually led to the creation of 3 different therapies which are used in the treatment of the disease, and she's also been inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. So for her story to be used even in the same category of difficult women is absolutely beyond me. Thankfully, though, we are near the end. As you can tell, I am slightly irritated by this point. But just as she's finishing up, we are brought back to the real reason for this podcast and all of the other podcasts, and it's got nothing to do with her guests' stories. I was chatting to my girlfriends recently, and we were talking about suggestions for what we could talk about and archetypes, and they all immediately and unequivocally jumped to the word difficult. That's the word you have to talk about. They said it gets thrown around so casually now, and as a woman, there's a certain point when you come to terms with the fact that not everyone's going to like you. The goal can't be for everyone to like you, but the goal can be for them to respect you. Meghan's Difficult podcast, or rather the Bitch podcast, was all about Meghan being labelled Duchess Difficult. It's very clear from the books Tom Bower and Valentine Lowe, where they got a lot of inside stories. It's very clear from even the emails that we saw in Meghan's fight that she had with the Daily Mail from former employees talking about the cruel treatment and the fact that lots of people quit and they burst into tears. Some of them, I presume, ended up in some sort of therapy due to the cruel manipulation and mind games that Meghan and Harry used to play. So it's very clear that Meghan does not practice what she preaches. Plus, in conjunction with that, we have all of the various stories that have come out from ex-colleagues, videographers, wedding dress designers, restaurant staff, Reitman's production staff, nannies, security, ex-family members. I say ex because Meghan's obviously cut everyone off, but basically anyone who's actually worked alongside Meghan or for Meghan. There's not many good stories out there of Meghan being a nice, kind, or respectful boss. It's clearly obvious that Meghan is using every single podcast to tackle, to dissect, to analyse an insult or a label that Meghan has been given. Even more so now with Tom Bower's book and Valentine Lowe's book that's come out. She's got a lot of podcasts to tackle because that's a lot of names that she's been called. Personally, the podcast that I can't wait for her to tackle is Gold Digger and Social Climber. Although I have a gut feeling that Meghan's possibly not quite ready to put her name alongside those words just yet. Anyway, to end the video, I'm going to end it in the style of Mimi. I am Taz, and I will see you really soon. Take care for now, guys. Bye.